Got all that figured out. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the POWLAX podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Chapla. Hope you guys are having a good week. I need to put this over by my mouth because that's how people are going to hear on YouTube. But so, before we get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to some people who have been supportive, and this POWLAX podcast is brought to you by Pro Lacrosse. Make sure that if you are looking for your next case of balls, you do not go with the greasy geese, that you make sure that you get balls that will stay consistent through the life of the ball so that you can use them for multiple years. They are the best balls out there, whether you get the LT, which is a ball that has, I actually have it right here, but which has a texture on it. It's a regular ball, but it has texture. It'll last a lot longer than regular balls. And then you have the X, which is made from a different type of rubber, and it just won't ever go bad. So that's what we are brought to you by today. And then we are brought to you by the POWLAX Master Coach thing, which is patreon.com/POWLAX, which if you've seen any of the YouTube videos online that go over specific offenses, defenses, drills, etc., each one of those videos corresponds to a PDF that you can print out by supporting essentially just what I do, which is creating lacrosse coaching content that is free for everyone to use all over. So hope you guys are having a good week. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Encore. They made our kits this year, so they made us our shooter shirts, our jerseys, and our shorts, and everyone has seemed to love them. I know that they got a shout out from one of the moms through Facebook because she posted a picture of her kid, and everyone was super excited about how awesome everybody looked. So big shout out to Johnny Christmas and the Encore squad. They definitely hooked it up, and everybody looks pretty sweet for our POWLAX team. Last but not least, I want to throw a shout out to the Mountain Lax 2025 team at our 8v8 game, our last game of the year, or I guess of this little season that we had. One of their coach, Patrick, actually found me and gave me a hat from their team. I should be wearing it, but I just wanted to make sure I shouted them out before we get started. Before we get started, if you have any questions or comments for me, feel free to leave them in the comment section. I've got TikTok up here, Instagram up here, YouTube up here. As we get into the later stages of the podcast, I will be using the back screen of my computer. I'm going to screen share some stuff as we talk about the two-man games, how to teach it, and basically what certain players have the mental capacity for is what we're going to be talking about, so that you don't spend a ton of time worrying about trying to teach kids that can't conceptualize the idea because you're viewing it in a X's and O's style that I really like, but it's really hard to teach younger kids specific things. So we're kind of going to walk through that progression in terms of how I see it, and we will, we'll see where we get when it comes to that. As a quick overview, we are going to be going over, I didn't have this really planned, I just kind of came up with it on the spot. We're going to go over the camp that we just ran and kind of how it ran and why we did what we did. Then we're going to go over the 8v8 league that we just ran, some of the troubles and the changes that we had to make in order to run the 8v8 league. We're not going to get into any of the, minutia of why we were able to play or any of that kind of stuff. Just more so the coaching points, and I might go into how to incentivize getting film for your teams and how to make that a valuable proposition for not only yourself, but for the teams that you play against and someone else who you are going to hire out to film your games. And for the most part, if parents are willing to participate, I think that would be awesome because everybody would love to have free film. And but we might get into that as we talk about 8v8. Finally, as we wrap it up, we're going to talk through the evolution of the two-man game, and the two-man game is not just picking for everyone who seems to always just pigeonhole it down to picking, and we're kind of going to talk through a progression of when you can start teaching specific things to specific kids so that, and really how to consistently ensure that players are learning how to play off the ball. Because I'd say that's probably the most important thing, is understanding how and why they need to do what they do. So before we get started, if you get if you have any questions, make sure to ask them. If you get lucky, I might see it and answer it during, because I get distracted relatively easily. And if not, I'll answer it at the end. But so we're going to start with a question, because Golden Strings Lacrosse asks, what's your favorite part of the game? My favorite part of the game is shooting, for sure, because it's something you can just do all the time. And when I say shooting, I mean the act of either getting into a position off ball where you can catch and shoot, or dodging and putting yourself in a position where you can then take a shot. And so I'm kind of hit or miss when it comes to, I guess that would be my favorite aspect of the game, but I also love the X's and O's ideas of how to teach and train players how to work together, which is why I created the whole coaching system and program. But so those would be my two favorite parts of the game. So as we get into the camp, actually, we're going to do one more update. So over the last, 2 months, my family has been moving. We're finally kind of settled. For those of you who can obviously see me at this point, which is everyone except for the people who are listening on the podcast, you can tell I'm not in the usual spot. I'm in a basement. All of this white, plastic is covering up insulation. And I just finished up the wall. So there you go for Instagram and TikTok. That's the new wall that I had to build, because I'll show YouTube now. Oh, maybe not. We'll see if I can pull it off. So you can see the side of that little wall, the gray thing. The reason I had to build the wall is because I can't film unless I have a wall, because I have to hang up the whiteboard. But so now that I'm actually in my house, I have the wall built. I've got a bunch of the yard is looking pretty good, and there's a bunch of just homeowner stuff that I hadn't been used to doing. I'm actually getting into creating new content and new work, which is awesome. The man down defenses video and the PDF is coming along. It's probably a couple weeks out still, because instead of doing the videos like I said I was going to do before, which were individual man down defenses, I'm going to do a complete and like probably hour and a half video on all of man down defense. It'll be able to break up into different segments where you can teach either one, but it'll have live video and all kinds of other cool stuff in it. But so that's what's coming for you. Once again, I appreciate everyone who supports me through Patreon and any other means by watching my videos, sharing any content. Definitely a big thank you there. All right, now we're good to go. So I'd say about a month and a half ago, I was approached by the Parker Hawks to run a camp that we had ran last summer. And it was a very, I don't want to say serendipitous, because I think that's kind of pretentious, but it's definitely a bit of a serendipitous thing, because the fact that we're in Douglas County is the only reason that we had the ability to run this camp, because the tri-county divisions, like basically Douglas County said, the mandates for COVID were not as harsh as the others, and I back that. That's about as far as we're going to get into that. But so we decided that we were going to run this camp. This year I got to run it by myself, and it was just a 3-day, 3-hour camp, which I like the 3-hour feel, because last year when we ran it and it was 6 hours, basically 2.5 hours, an hour lunch, and then another 2.5 hours, that was hard, especially with younger players. And so the age groups that we had was 1st through 8th grade, right? And so in order to do a camp with 1st to 8th graders, you have to have the ability to divide up the players, right? That's the first thing that you're going to have to be able to do. And so I called on a couple of the players who play for our POWLAX team, and we divided them up and, had our goalie come out and he worked with the goalies, and then we spread it out. So you had 1st through 3rd grade, 4th through 6th grade, and 7th and 8th grade. And so if that hadn't have been tried and I hadn't have divided everybody up, it would have been an awful experience, because our ability to coach each age group is very dependent on, it's the same as having a brand new player with a bunch of more experienced players, right? Like inexperienced player will develop much faster, but he'll also be a drain on the players who are used to playing much faster, right? And so the key to how we ran these clinics was we basically divided everybody up into their groups, and then I'm going to pull up our practice planning. We did some things where for the 5th through 8th graders, we did the same thing. So I'll talk through kind of the first day. So the hard part about a camp for the very first day for any coaches that run them is you have to determine the skill level of the players, right? If you're not looking into the skill levels of the players that you are coaching, it's impossible to kind of know what you want to bring into the games or the games or the practices, because basically you have to have the ability to modify what you're doing, because if they're not capable of doing, and they've never done, like throwback line drills or things of that nature, or they just don't have good stick skills, it's pretty impossible to put them into a, star drill, because everything's hitting the ground. But in terms of like younger players who don't have the skills, there are two foundations that you should always utilize. Well, three, I'd say. First is the first foundation of younger players and how you want to make sure what they're doing is that in any drill you run, everyone has to be active, right? So for those, you think of things like Hungry Hungry Hippos or relay races, where even though a player might not be participating in each time, they're fully invested in the act of playing that game, right? Like the energy level will stay up if you're playing games like Hungry Hungry Hippos and relay races and things of that nature. The other thing that you can do, and this can be a little bit tougher because kids can kind of screw around and do this and that, is doing things like partner passing or standing partner passing, where each player is working on specific things, but no one is sitting, right? So like you think of things like line drills where there's one ball in, and say you have 3 players on each side. At any given moment, you have the 2 players that are involved in the pass active in the drill, and the other players at the end of the line are going to be sword fighting or doing other stuff like that. So your ability to keep everybody involved is the first thing. So for us on the first day, we did these everydays, and we totally snagged these everydays from Brian Langtree and Six Star, because as he starts putting out more stuff, like it's funny because much of the individual skill stuff that people like Two Wolves Lacrosse, Brian Langtree, Shake School are doing are very good to get players in the habit of moving in the correct ways, and I really like how they're doing them. But more than that, the way that they did their everyday training was awesome, because it really allowed each player to focus intently on the most important aspects of the game, which is clear. Like, so you think about what matters to people, and the huge thing about when you think about what matters to people, regardless of what avenue you're talking about in life, what you should be watching is what they're doing, right? Their actions are going to show you what is most important to them, right? So for me, at night, if I am, not working, like, so each night I have probably about a hour and a half time to myself where I can do kind of whatever I want. And with that time, I have 2 choices. I can either sleep, I can work, I can kind of veg out and do whatever. And so depending on that day, whatever I'm doing is kind of the most important thing to me that day. And some days it changes. But when you look into Coach Langtree's everydays, he's got these 4 ideas, right? So first is V cutting to pass, right? I think that's something that a lot of people don't work on enough, because they just see the pass as what it is. But so the way these are set up is essentially have a line of players, and they each have a ball, and they're going to throw the ball to a coach who will immediately give it back to them. And that allows the drill to progress well. But when you get a player, like, so a player who played for POWLAX this summer had played and had done training with Coach Langtree, every single time this kid went to throw the ball, he always stepped away with his hands. And it was amazing to see, and you could tell that training like really helped him. So we wanted to incorporate it. So first you have popping to pass. Then you have basically jab or V cut to catch, both hands. And because you're using a coach on one side of it, it's very beneficial, because you're not going to slow anything down. Like, I had a group of 8 players, and we went through those 8 players extremely quickly. And then the coaches that I had with me, they got to progress through it well. And the cool thing about that was, well, we'll talk about the autonomy of coaching in a minute, but we'll get through this first drill. So then we do, everyone lines up near the coach, and you roll out each individual, or you roll out one ground ball, and they have to pick the ball up, roll to the right or left, and throw back, right? And so those are just the 3 things that you're going to have. And in doing those, you get through all of the basics really, really well. And I think that many of my drills do not have a coach involved because I'm used to coaching upwards of 70 players, sometimes by myself, sometimes with a couple other coaches. But even at the minimum, I'm with 10 to 12 players, right? And at the high school level, players can distribute the ball and pass and catch relatively well, so it's not that important to have a coach be there. But if you have anything where you've got low numbers, utilizing, or you can spread out coaches to give each group low numbers, utilizing drills with coaches that can continue and keep the progression moving quickly is just awesome. And so huge thanks to Coach Langtry on that one. Everyone borrows from each other. So next we did partner passing, because partner passing allows each player to be involved, and you can move through a progression of skills. That one worked really well. And then we had 2v1s to goal from up top or the crease. And this was essentially to build in some defensive principles where, you're trying to think about defending the middle and making sure you get to the ball and forcing a pass. And if you can get back, you can get back, right? But so for younger players, this is one of my favorite drills from the midline, because anytime a defenseman picks up an offensive player in a 2v1 near the midline, the easy throw over their head and goal allows them to understand that they need to get to the middle of the field quicker rather than pick up late. But so it really helps for players who are getting in on defense. After that, we decided to do attack, midfield, and defense, and we tried to mix up all of the groups. That didn't work for the 1st through 3rd graders. And what was cool about the groups that we had is we had 3 3rd graders who asked to be in the 4th through 6th group, and they did really well in that group. And then we had a 6th grader who asked to be with the 7th, 8th graders, and he also did really well in that group as well. But it was definitely because of how they, basically the fact that they had played before. But so within our attack, midfield, and defensive groups, we worked on Kyle Hartzell's approach drills, where you use the side of the goal and the pipe to gauge distance with your poke as you are approaching. You are essentially doing footwork and checking at the same time with the pipe of a goal, so that basically you're working your footwork, but it's also within the context of how you want to gauge distance with a defenseman, right? And so our defensive coach went and took that. Our attackman coach went and did dodging from X, and we worked on, or actually shooting, but so we worked on turning the corner, stepping away, and then turning the corner, stepping away, getting to 5-5, and using a question mark, stepping away, and then inside rolling. And so our midfielders then worked on alley dodge on the run, sweep on the run, alley dodge to a rollback, sweep to a rollback. And the reason we did these is because to finish the play makes, like, to practice the idea of finishing first and then incorporate the dodging just makes more sense to me. It's a part whole method thing, and I want players to know how and where they should finish each time, so they have a goal to get to when they begin their dodges. The other aspect of this that I think is important is when you do these short-sighted finishing drills where they are already in positions that they want to get to on the field, you're easily able to really focus in on how they are finishing, not necessarily, whether the dodge was good. I know tons of players who can dodge really, really well, but once they get inside, they have no idea what to do because they haven't, really worked on anything other than time and room shooting. Once that was done, we did dodging, and we did a slide 'em and leave 'em series which essentially is the idea of manipulating your defenseman into giving you an angle by sliding on the perimeter of the field rather than attacking the top foot. Then we did top foots. Then we did one-on-ones. Now, I don't even think we got to the one-on-ones, and I'm kind of happy that we didn't because, I just don't think that it would have worked well. But so as we've gotten through this, and so for the last, we'll just cover up the first day and finish it. For the last day, or for the last part of the day, the younger guys were able to do relay races, Hungry Hippos, and any kind of like 3v3s that they did. And what we found was that the 6 to 10 first through third graders loved doing that, but we put the same 2 coaches with that group every day. And those players had the autonomy to try and to do new things to keep the players involved rather than having them do what I had prescribed them. And I thought that was definitely an important aspect of how to coach within the camp, because for those players, the most important thing for them is that they enjoy themselves, they have fun. On the last day, they actually decided that they wanted to run a lap, which I thought was just kind of nuts. But I mean, that's kind of how crazy 5 to 7-year-olds are. But so they actually ran a lap. It was fun. And every day, the coach of the younger group would come and he would like say, something funny. So basically when we did our everydays where they had to, pop out and pass and then jab to catch, the player said, so you just want me to like juke out the cone? That's what you want me to do? And, that's pretty much exactly what we wanted him to do. But his, first grade mind, it was a good way to articulate it for those kids. And so as they progressed through the week or through the 3 days, it really definitely helped them. The middle group that we had, the 4 through 6 graders, had about 10 to 11 players each day. And so they set up 5-on-5 like every single day and just basically played a 5-on-5 game with these 4x4 goals. And the coaches became the goalies with tennis balls. And so that worked out really, really well. Finally, for the 7th, 8th graders, we had probably double of any of the other groups, and so they played things like West Jenny. I think we tried Sideways West Jenny one of the days, and, and then we did, I want to say, we did like a 7v7 side-to-side as well. But so the most important aspect of that was definitely the fact that we spread them out, and each group had their own things that they could be doing, and it worked pretty well. Another drill, so for the second day, we started with the same everydays, and then we added the over the shoulder, which I think is another one that I forgot to say. And then the Hungry Hippos, the throwback line drills, and so Hungry Hippos for the youngest guys and throwback line drills for the other 2. And that one went way better after we had gotten the everydays correct. So I didn't know how to run the everydays well and efficiently the first day, and then I figured out how to do that. Tommy Connor, because you've said it twice, if you want to go watch tricks, just go to the YouTube channel, man. You can go watch tricks there. I'll post some tricks later today probably. So now, once we got through that, one of the things that we added in was a circle dodging drill, which you can see on the YouTube, which is basically all of the players are in a big circle and you're practicing how to manipulate the stick. So you're doing wind-up face dodges, wind-up spin moves, and each coach becomes a player that they, actively do the drill against. And the cool thing about this is that everybody's actively involved. So we had 40 kids who were actively doing it. And the first time I ever experienced this was actually in high school at one of the DU camps. So that was definitely a cool thing. So Mike says, creating and implementing a solid pre-practice or pre-game routine for players to jump right into it as they come to the field helps create that higher tempo practice environment. So one thing that I thought was kind of interesting is on Instagram the other day, I forget what the team was, but Hayden, one of the local coaches here, a kid who I actually coached at Mountain Vista, Hayden King, he retweeted a team's tweet that basically said that what they were doing was they were just hopping right into West Jenny. They didn't even really do any like stretching or anything of that nature. But I definitely think that their ability to just pop in and play, and then I guess they didn't have as many injuries as they had the year before. And it reminded me of Zombieland, where he's like, you got to limber up. And Woody Harrelson is like, you ever see a lion limber up before he goes after a gazelle? And he's like, well, no. And so, I don't know. I'm not into that, I guess it wouldn't be biology. It would be like kinesthesiology that is in there. But I think the mindset thing might be what you're talking about too, which is definitely a tough thing to get players to do. I remember in high school, I was very... Like, I had Boston Market one day. I had this ham sandwich from Boston Market, and I played great. And then the rest of the season, I got Boston Market every day before I played. And I didn't always play great. So the next thing that we did in our group, once we got to the position-specific stuff, is we worked on wing dodging, right? So I think wing dodging is a very under-practiced thing. And I think it's beneficial because no matter where you're dodging from the wing, you have the ability to go in front of the goal, right? If you go underneath, you can still push to the front, and if you go over the top, you are in front of the goal. And what it allows you to do is, it just allows you to be dangerous. The hard part about it is reading slides from the wing is much more difficult than reading slides from up top, because the angles in which the slides can come from is just wider, because you're running to the middle of the field rather than like cascading off of the side of the field. If you think about the crease as like a circle. So you did underneath, over the top, underneath to a roll, over to a roll. And then what we tried to do, but it really didn't work very well with the kids in the camp, I think because we had too many players, and because we were in our position specific groups rather than our age groups, we had players who would just not understand, and then it just messed it up. Basically, because we had too many ages, it just didn't work well. And so we would put a player inside. If they dodged underneath, they would mirror to the top. If they dodged from the top, they would mirror over the top. We'll get more into that when we get to the two-man games a little bit further. The other thing is, on the first day, the goalies and the defensemen mentioned they really wanted to work on passing. Right. And so the defense did the same approaches and breakdowns that we did the first day, and they did it better because they had experienced it at one point. And then we did the banana cuts and overpasses. Now, as our players were working with and doing they were working with our goalie coach and our defensive coach, and they were doing this. The goalie coach and the defensive coach, who were both, high school players, allowed the defenseman to get upfield without the goalie moving up. And the whole reason we were doing this, and so let's just talk over the whole drill. Basically, we only had 2 defensemen. We had 2 goalies. And so those 4 worked together. And so basically what happened was the defenseman would come into the middle of the field. The goalie would take the ball and he would yell clear. The defenseman would banana out, getting deep, wide, and never losing sight of the goalie, because if he drops it in a game, you're going to have to get back really quick. And the goalie, as he catches the ball, has to look upfield for a second, and then, or maybe 2 seconds, left, right, to see who's open, and then he's got to get out behind the cage, away from any offensive player, and then he's got to throw the ball to the left or the right, and then they have to throw the ball over. Now, what was funny was we did this drill, and then in the games, the goalie threw it into an attackman's stick twice. And it was awesome to see and have a reference to the fact of that we had worked on what his mind and his eyes needed to do when he picks up the ball, because it allowed him to understand why he was doing that. Because then once he had the drill and then had the experience, now I'm betting he'll figure that out and not do that again when he gets to the season. Now, the next thing we did was the best drill ever. And that is essentially a 3-on-3 drill where 2 goalies will clear to opposite sides, where a player will, so you have them circle around the crease, right? The goalies will yell clear. Both teams will move to either side. So the dark team will go to the right side and the light team will go to the left side. And one player of the 3 will go to the 0-yard line, the 30-yard line, and like the 45-yard line. Right? And they have to throw the ball out to either wing, to the sides of the goal at GLE, and then up to the 30 and then up to the 45. Whoever gets it to the 45 first wins and becomes the offensive group that's going to come in and play defense. Now, here's the thing about this drill. The most important, or I guess one of the cheap things about this drill not cheap. One of the things that players will never, could learn to do by just doing it a ton of times is once you've thrown the ball from GLE upfield, you should just get into the middle of the field, because you have two things that could happen. Either A, your team wins and now you're wide open in the middle of the field, or B, your team loses and now you're in the middle of the field ready to play defense and pick up the ball. So that little tidbit definitely helped them play in the best drill ever. The kids loved it. They loved playing it at camp. It was definitely one of the drills that, sometimes in camps they can kind of slog along. That was not during this time. Then I think because I used my camp day 2 practice plan to make my day 3 plan. I don't have my day 2 plan anymore. And so then on the last day, for the last 45 minutes, we did longest throw, longest goal, where you set everybody up and everyone has a ball and they all have to shoot from 30 yards, then 40 yards, then 50 yards and see if they can make it. And it's not like you miss from 30 and then you're out. Like, you miss from 30 and then the players who made it from 30 are the first to shoot from 40 to see how many people can get each one. And the cool thing is that sometimes players will miss from 30 and then get it from 40. And then we did a no-angle challenge where players would shoot from about 7 yards, I think it was 5 yards out, from 2 yards above GLE, or I think it was 4 yards above GLE, 2 yards above GLE, 1 yard above GLE, and then from behind GLE. And if you're on TikTok or Instagram, I think one of my third post to go was me hitting a no angle shot from behind GLE, and you hear a kid go, "How?" in the background. And I love doing things like those because it gets players to think and to, realize that more is possible than they have even thought about doing, right? That's also the reason I like tricks so much, and why we've got kids on the Instagram who were like, do tricks, yada yada. So that was the camp experience, and it was awesome. And once again, our ability to spread the field, where we had 3x3 goals for the 1st through 3rd graders, 4x4 goals for the 4th through 6th graders, and regular goals for the 7th and 8th graders helped us so much. And so all we did was we had one big turf field, and we just lined them up from wing line to wing line. From one side to the other. The other thing that really helped a lot was there's one part of this field that has this big hill. And so we put the young guys near that hill so we didn't lose all of our balls. But that was our camp experience. It was a lot of fun. Definitely glad we got to do it. We'll probably do it again here soon, but I figured sharing another thing that I thought was funny. So I think it was a good thing. I think it was, take 2. I think that sharing the experience of organizing and running a camp for 40 players, 37 to 40 players, will help with the delegation of other camps and things of that nature. I remember the first day as we were all wrapping up and, we were putting all the stuff, back in my car so I could take it home. One of the coaches was like, I always went to camps and just thought it was like, hey, you're just going to go and you're going to do this, you're going to do that. I never really thought about all the stuff that actually goes into the idea of running a camp. And it's just, I think it'll be beneficial to share my experience of running a camp. All right, so moving on. The next topic I wanted to discuss was our 8v8 league. So, before we get into this, I'm going to drink probably the rest of this coffee and then my concoction drink of an emergency with about half of this full of water and then a LaCroix. They're just amazing. Get my vitamins, and it's got a nice little, Get my vitamins, and it's got a nice little, carbonation from the LaCroix that makes it seem like soda, even though there's no sugar in it. Well, except I think emergencies have a little bit of sugar. I'm not positive, though. So don't take my word for that on that. So, and coffee. One moment. Ooh, maybe I'll show some highlights. Let's see. No highlights. Sorry, people. So, actually, hold on. Maybe we will show some highlights. but I don't have any of that tagged. So, okay, never mind. No highlights. So, in our 8v8 league, we were lucky enough to have Nate Watkins from Fire Lacrosse organize an 8v8 league that we played in Lakewood. It was awesome. We got like 7 games in, and at this point in our summer schedule, we have a team that is playing, and my objective through all of this madness has been I've got to make sure the players that sign up for this get to play, right? That's my main concern. I want to make sure that they get to play. And so our trip to Chicago got canceled. We've got 2 Boomtown tournaments coming up that should happen considering we've been doing a lot here, and we will be having a tournament this weekend. But with everything kind of up in shambles, my objective was to make sure that players played. So I decided to add a 8v8 league, and every Saturday we'd go out and we'd play 1 or 2 games. It was so much fun to go out and play in this 8v8 league. So here are the rules. Think 7v7, 1 face-off at the beginning of each quarter. Then as the ball enters any net and they score, it is an immediate turnover and the play just resumes again. So as I'm tagging this on score break, it's kind of tough. It almost should be like basketball where it basically just gives the other team the ball as far as tagging, but that's score break, and I recommend it, but a lot of people probably don't know what I'm talking about. So then the other rule that really was an interesting rule was that there was no backup, right? So any shot that went out of bounds immediately turned the ball over. And that was like the worst part for our teams, because I would say we gave up 70 to 80% of our goals in transition with just players not getting back. And we had a team that had enough players to run. And so it is just interesting to see how that became such a, foundational part. And we worked on a lot of transition stuff too, and we scored a lot of goals in transition as well. It was just interesting to see that because of the quickness of shooting, missing, everyone having the previous understanding of the fact that we'd get the ball back because we had a player closest to the ball when it went out, end up giving up a lot of transition as it went back the other direction. So that was definitely a very cool part of, and a part to get used to, of the 8v8. I remember the very first, the first game back coaching, like I was yelling at the ref a bit. I don't think it was the ref. I think it was someone. Oh, it was because we were playing a team, and it was mainly just about a kid ducking his head with the ball. But either way, I got a little bit heated, and I, as I got into my car and drove off, I was like, okay, I got to make sure I tone it down a little bit. Don't get too caught up in my head for that. But so within the 8v8 league, it's 1 goalie, 2 defensemen, 3 midfielders, 2 attackmen. And the players wanted to play it like it was box, where no one ever kind of goes behind the goal unless you're Curtis Dixon and you're going to, dunk it or do whatever. And so because you had no backup, there really was no reason to go behind the goal either. But one of the things that worked really well and that I always wanted to try to do was to get a player to X and swing the ball through X so we would have slow breaks. But, as we did it, so basically if the ball went down the right side, we would have the left attackman get to X, throw the ball to X, and then we could find cutters as he dodged up that side. And then once that happened, we would then get into our settled sets. Now, making that happen in practice through drills was very easy. Making it happen in the game was basically non-existent. So then we went to, and a part of that was also pass down, pick downs with both sides, and that worked relatively well. But within the 5v5 set, picks happened pretty well, but there was a level of dodging and just I'm trying to think of exactly how I'm trying to term this. There's a level of a 2-man game and picking that has to incorporate the ideas of a dodge, because if it doesn't, there's no reason to switch. And that's the tough part. Like, we scored a bunch of goals off pass down pick downs and pass downs where a player's going to go pick and then a player would cut from the backside. That was really good. And the one place that we didn't score in terms of two-man games, like ability, was the ability to draw a slide, bang it to the backside, and then dodge a recovery. That was where we didn't score very much of our goals. And so as we're playing through our wing picks and we're doing all of that, the thing that really made me start thinking about two-man game, especially after doing the camp and then this 8-on-8 league, was exactly what would you want to bring to a 1st through 3rd grade group, to a 4th through 6th grade group, to a 7th and 8th grade group, and then to a high school group, right? Because our high school group has been doing picking and wing dodging for a while, and they're pretty darn good at it when they dodge correctly and actually try to get to the goal. And it doesn't always work. Like, they don't always see how drawing a slide creates space for off-ball players, and off-ball players don't always understand that they're creating space for others. So when you think about lacrosse offense, whether it's 6v6, 5v5, whatever, the easiest way to score is to just beat your man and score, right? And that can be off-ball or on-ball. It's just a 1-on-0 for whatever that is. So you can either cut and your player leaves you and you get fed inside and you catch and finish, or you dodge, beat your man, no one slides, and you shoot and score, right? Those are the easiest things to do, and they're the easiest to understand. Where coaches have trouble, I feel, which I think it's more so I have trouble when I think players can do things and then realize halfway through doing something that I have to modify and create a change in what I'm doing, is I try and get players to learn, like the players in our camp. I was trying to teach them how to mirror when they had no understanding of why they would want to cut to the crease to begin with, right? And so now that we've kind of gone over some of the aspects of our 8v8 league, I want to talk a little bit about the progression of a two-man game and how we want to think about that. And so as I'm talking, I'm going to give an overview of exactly what this means. And then if you're not on YouTube, I recommend moving to YouTube so that you can see my screen as I outline exactly what this stuff is and kind of what it looks like. And I'm kind of going to shift some things around because I've got to make sure that I can see my screen. So for people who are on the podcast or who are not able to see the screen, this is what we have set up. So to overview this, I'm gonna use terms based on my own terminology, and some of you guys might not quite understand this, but within these contexts, I will be, where are we going? I will be talking about and using numbers for any location of the field, right? So as I'm doing this, there we go. And now I want this guy. So top left is 1, top center is 2, top right is 3, side left is 4, crease is 5, 6 is side right, 7 is back left, 8 is X, and back right is 9. And the reason I use those numbers is because that corresponds to a phone's pad. So I don't have a phone. Maybe I do actually have a phone. Yep, I do. And it's a broken iPhone. If you think about a phone and you think about the fact that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, I am basically mapping a field onto that because it will allow players to think through what I'm saying on the field without having to memorize and remember a BS system like, 100, 200, 300, 400, yada, yada, or like a clock would do it pretty well, but then you have nothing for the crease. But so it's basically, that's how I think about the field now, because it allows me to communicate effectively and efficiently, and the kids already have the memory for the field, and so it's just easy enough. So what we have is an open set, and within the open set we have 3 middies up top, and we have an attackman and at the 4 and the 6, and an attackman at X. Now, the reason we're in an open set to start is because this is what players should learn first. And I realized this fully last winter while playing Columbine in the Foothills Fieldhouse because they tore us to shreds with it, and it made me understand that our players didn't understand why nothing was working or why we couldn't defend them, because we hadn't really thought through the idea of adjacent slides and how the two would work in this concept, right? So what worked really well for them was they would get the ball to X with A2 and they would dodge. So now as A2 is dodging, A1 would clear through. This is a simple triangle rotation with your attackman. And what would happen was this defenseman guarding A1 would show, the ball would be thrown inside and they would score, right? And it was super, super simple, super easy for them. And they scored probably 4 or 5 goals doing this. And when you think about the idea of teaching this, it makes perfect sense because all you have to do is teach, if someone dodges at you, get to the middle of the field, right? And that should be the default because it's the easiest thing. That's the part that when I think in my head about what I know and I'm thinking through how the game works, I need to dumb myself down in order to give a representation that makes sense for the players I'm coaching. So there are 2 ways to slide to this. First is when you slide, the 2 is the near side midi who is here. Now, I actually don't like this anymore because what ends up happening is then you have a step down here. And so the offensive progression of this is very, very simple. And sorry, it was not Columbine. I thought it was Columbine because it was Matt Plitnick's team, but it was actually Vista because Plitnick is now at Vista. But so, and this step down is there, so you actually don't want to do that either. And so the progression of this open set offense is super easy. What I actually like doing is making sure that if you're off, if you're like really far away from the ball, you need to be spidered in enough to where if this player decides to go, as they clear through here, is that if you're backside and in basically a 3 position, you are then able to cover the crease because this pass up through to M1 is less efficient than it would be. And so the pass went from the 6 to the 2 if you're listening along. So now, as we are considering why this is the easiest thing to do and why it makes sense to teach your 2-man game with the basically dodge and clear through mentality, the reason is because if you learn to clear through first, you're not going to be in the way of dodgers, right? So when you consider this position right here where M1 has the ball in the 2 spot and you've got M3 in the 1, you've got M2 in the 3. Here, let me just make this easier. We'll move M1, M2, and M3 to their position. So M1 is in the 1, M2 is in the 2, and M3 is in the 3. If M2 decides he wants to dodge to the 4, which is down the left side alley, the right-handed alley dodge, he's going to need M1 to clear through or shallow cut and get out of his way if he wants to really dodge effectively down this alley, right? And so the problem with this becomes if M1, who is in his way, hasn't been taught to get into the middle of the field when he sees M2 looking like he's going to dodge, it's going to create an issue because as he dodges, M2 is going to hit DM2, who's defending M1, and he's not going to be able to dodge the alley like he'd want, right? So the very first 2-man game that you should ever do is either, well, so I actually think it's a give and go, but if you perceive your teammate to be dodging and you think he has the ability to go towards you, you need to get to the middle of the field. And this will allow everything else to kind of cascade from there. But so that's the very first thing that you're learning in a 2-man game setting without off-ball play like cutting, right? So if it's a guy with the ball, there's no passes, and he's dodging, that's the first thing that you should learn. Now, as this progresses, so we're actually going to get rid of this just so I can kind of go over how we would teach that. And so I'm going to put these guys up here, and I'm going to bring these 3 down. So how would we want to teach that? The first thing I would do is I would have a 3VO. And if you've watched the 3VO, 3V2, 3V3 video, I'm just rehashing what that means. And this is something that Coach Monroe taught me, and we did this a ton at Mountain Vista. And here is, let me make this so I'm not, it's weird. I'm like, my live on TikTok, I'm like really bright and weird looking. But let's see if I can fix it. Come on, where are we at? Oh, well. So this player up top dodges, and you either shallow cut, which is coming back to refilling where he is, or you clear through. This player follows, and then you throw back, and then this player can dodge either way. Maybe it dodges this way, and it goes like this. Now, the problem with going back and forth is that this player gets caught in this back and forth here. So what you really want to do is you want to make sure that they know that if you're in any kind of triangle motion where they're going to replace all three of each other, that when you throw back, that you actually might want to dodge back the way the ball came, which kind of goes against some dodge, pass principles, but that's kind of what you want to do. Then what you do once you have that is you put in two defenders so that you have an opening in any position. So now as you dodge, this player clears through, and as he's clearing through, this player has to learn to split two, defend the most dangerous player, and then as you throw back, you teach the defensive rotations, and now as this all happens, you always have a player who's open. Sorry, I need to take all three of these guys. So dodge, clear through, follow, and now if you've got a pass, rotate, pass, you see how the offense is trying to create a pass or a dodge pass mentality, and you do it like that, right? But so the act of teaching it in a 3-man small-sided game allows the players to understand why they want to, I guess, dodge, and why the player on the outside of the field would want to get through to the middle of the field. Now, once you build this progression and you integrate 3 players, now the offense has to think in terms of, I actually have to beat my man and score, right? So when we're dodging from up top from the 2 and we're dodging to the 4, and the player in the 4 clears through to the center and then out to the 6, and you follow from the 6 to the 2, now what has to happen is, if we don't draw this slide from this player, we're not going to have the advantage that we had when we had 2 players, and therefore you teach the idea of dodging effectively so that you draw a slide, and then you have to beat the recovery to this point, and that's why these things work. But so now, if I am trying to teach 2-man games, that's the first thing I want, because the most simple thing to do is dodge and score, and therefore I want to reinforce that principle in order to make sure that that is what happens, right? So you can do that with really young players, as young as, I'd probably say, 3rd, 4th grades, probably about the earliest I would do it. I definitely wouldn't do it in 2nd grade. I would just teach them, I would more so have them just play a lot more in 2nd grade. But when you are considering the 2-man game, that's kind of the first ones I would do. The next one I would do is a kind of more of an off-ball one, which we're not going to talk about too much, but it's just pass down and then cut the middle, and then you have a fill, right? So that's a pretty easy motion. It resets itself, and you can easily do that within the confines of an open set, right? So in that same open set that we were in before, you're doing the same basic thing. Let me make sure this goes up to where they should be. If we're now in our open set, it would work the exact same way, right? So we'd pass down, this player would cut the middle, this player would fill, and now we are working on we're working within the confines of 6 players moving instead of 3. So now, the toughest part about all of this is the following point. You must teach players to be aware of not only their defensemen, but they need to be aware of what their own player is looking like he's going to do, right? So let's say, for instance, let's go back into this exact example, and so I can think through it with some visuals. So if M2 has the ball in the 2, M3 is in the 1, just like we did before. If M2 doesn't look like he's going to dodge, M3 is probably like going to want to pop out, right? But so if he pops out and the LSM stays in and M2 dodges here, he's going to hit that slide. It's going to be very easy. And M3 is not in a position where he becomes a dangerous player that someone left. He's actually a liability, because now if M2 is now defended by DM1 and the LSM, that's a free double that the LSM can take. And so as you're teaching players to read what the other players are doing, the next step, I would say, is to teach this in terms of why you want to get into the middle of the field based on movements you can make after you are in the middle of the field. So first you teach the clear through, which is what you want to do to get out of the way of a dodge. Then you teach the cut the middle after you pass to that player, because say your defenseman's going to be, going to look away, or whatever you want to term it as, whatever you want to sell it to the players with. Then the next thing is, what do I want to do once I've cut to the middle? And this is where all of the two-man game stuff really starts to get a lot deeper. And so from the middle of the field, now we're looking into setting picks that players can drive their men off of, or the first thing I would teach is mirroring. So now we have a player on the crease, and we've got players on the exterior of the field. Let's say we want to dodge from the 1, and he can go down the alley, or he can go across the top, right? So if he sweeps across the top, the player on the crease should mirror and get opposite of him, so that if his man slides, he now becomes open. We'll get a rotation, yada, yada. That's kind of just the back end, but it proves the point on what I want to do from the middle of the field. I want to get away from the player with the ball, so that if my player decides to slide, he will have enough time to see the slide come, step away, and then pass to me, who is now in open space on the other side of the field, right? That's just the basic idea. So that's when you would then term mirroring. Now, the problem with doing this next, and what I've found, and this has been my usual way of teaching it, is that it actually doesn't help me with the exterior of the field, because the player's not on the exterior of the field. He's in the middle of the field, and you can't teach mirroring with a player who's on the outside of the field. Like, in a sense, a shallow cut is a mirror, but really it's not, because if the player dodges the other way, you wouldn't mirror anyway. And so it actually becomes a negative thing. So here's why, or here's what you should do. So when the player in the 2 decides he is going to dodge this way, if a player gets caught outside, you have to teach them either shallow cutting, picking, or overlapping, right? So you don't really want to pick if you're on the exterior of the field, because it's too easy for the players to switch and do this and that kind of just becomes what it is. But so as this player dodges towards M2, if M2 understands the idea of overlapping, where a player can flip the ball to him and then he can dodge this way, that's a really good thing. It works really well. The other thing is, if he's going to set this pick, right? So if M3 is now dodging again and he decides he wants to come inside and kind of set his pick, if the LSM easily picks up, now you have to then, oh, hold on, let me make that happen. So as DM1 gets picked and the LSM picks this up, now you have to kind of teach that slip and like your pass down, pick down types of theories. But so I think it's important to teach the idea of mirroring from the crease, but not until players understand the options that you have in an adjacent position, because so many players get caught in that adjacent position if you don't teach them what to do on the exterior of the field before the middle of the field. For the most part, players in the middle of the field understand the idea of staying away from the ball, so that most players that aren't taught it well don't actually read their own defenseman, but they understand the idea of, if my player slides, if I'm open, now they're going to pass inside, now I'm going to shoot. But, so I think that within the confines of the two-man game, that's an important thing to teach. And so then you have all of the picking, all of the other stuff that would come in through the two-man game video and all of those things. Now, The final thing I'm going to add in, and something that if you are watching the PLL and the MLL, you are going to see a ton of, is Coach Monroe's hang up two-man game stuff. Now, so live is going to end in about 24 seconds. We're going to hop right back into this, and then this will probably be relatively quick, but either way, I'm actually just going to end it now. So if you're on Instagram, hop back in once you see the new live symbol. All right, we're going to end that for the Instagrammers. I'm going to go to share to IGTV. We'll make the cover something where it looks like I'm thinking hard. Oh, I've got to do stuff now. Sorry about the delay, everybody. July 22nd. I wonder if my description's still copied. Yes, it is. That's awesome. All right, post. Let's see how long that takes to go. I'm probably going to have to cut out of this. Yeah, I'm just going to end it. Okay. So now, sorry for the wait, everyone. This shouldn't take too long. Boom, boom. And live is back up. Cool. Welcome back, everyone, for Instagram. We're going to do a quick overview of the hang-up two-man game as we've worked through our two-man game progressions and things of that. This is a Coach Monroe theory, and as I was working with Coach Monroe, the cool thing about watching this presentation was because I was coaching with him like 8 years ago, much of what he had established as his methodology of coaching was something that he had very solid foundations on, but he hadn't completed this idea, but he'd seen it in all of the NLL games and the box games, the high-level box stuff, but he hadn't put it into one theory. And now that he has it in one theory, I highly recommend that for anyone who hasn't seen it. You can look up JM3 hang up two-man games, and essentially the idea is, in the same way you would hang up a player on the goal, is you're hanging up a player on a pick. Now, the trouble with this is, as far as teaching this in terms of younger players, is that it's the same reason why zones are so efficient at younger age groups, because players don't have the distance to shoot. But so basically, first off, your ball carrier has to be dangerous enough to where they can easily control the ball and control their defenseman, and then run their defenseman off a pick. Now, the pick will be placed right at the edge of dangerous space, right? Or right inside the edge of dangerous space. And here's why. So what Coach Monroe noticed, and what Coach Monroe taught me when we were coaching at Vista together, was that the thing that really made picks work really well was, as the player was dodging at the pick, he said that they should do a rocker here to make this player hesitate, and that also allowed the player picking to set a much better pick, right? But so as he continued to watch all of this and to figure this out, you ended up with a defensive player who was trying to come under here. Now, because A1 is just inside basically his dangerous space zone, his ability to shoot, if this defenseman decides to come underneath, he's just going to shoot it right over the top. And you see players like Wes Berg do this all the time. And there's actually, if you go to the Boston Cannons Instagram feed, there's a play where I want to say it's Randy Stotts does this so well. I'm not sure which of the Stotts brothers. I know it was a Stotts brother, but one of these players, like, it's the perfect example of this hang-up two-man game. But so if this player decides to come over the top with him, the pick is going to work. And now you are just into your kind of two-man game where now you're slipping, yada, yada. But if he doesn't and goes underneath, you're shooting. And so the problem with this in terms of teaching it to players who don't have range is that this player's not dangerous yet. And so what ends up happening is, as this player comes over and they switch, it just makes the switch a little bit easier because the hang-up principles don't quite work. Now, there might be a way to make that really work effectively, but this is kind of one of the other thoughts that I've been trying to, make happen, because, like, it's valid at the highest level, right? So it has to have some agency as you trickle down, but it's not something that you can use if you don't have players who can score from a distance where the pick can be set, right? So the odds of a pick, or I guess you just have to have a ball carrier that can manipulate their defenseman well enough so that they can get inside to set that pick, right? But so this is on the farthest edge of your two-man game and the progression of teaching two-man games, because younger players don't have that distance, right? So, yeah, so that's just some of the stuff that I've been thinking about. And yeah, so I think that's going to wrap up our podcast for the day. We're going to do some closing comments. If you have any questions for me, you can hit me up on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of the things, anything POWLAX. Make sure to check out the POWLAX YouTube channel, watch any of those videos, and check out the POWLAX PDFs. You can get you can get every PDF I've ever made, and a PDF is essentially a playbook, right? So I want to say it's upwards of like 250 pages of playbook for $5 a month, and you can literally download everything. Everything I make is free except for the PDFs course, or all the videos I make are free. The PDFs, you just have to kind of support what I do, and we're getting good work done. We're going to have probably the best man down defensive video that's, I think, ever been created, because it's going to have all the live video in it. I'm going to definitely take my time on it. It's going to be very good. So if you would like to become a supporter, you can do that at patreon.com/POWLAX by donating as little as $5 a month. $5 gets you access to all of my playbooks. And then I want to say we'll be doing a coaches only Q&A, which is the $25 tier, here in the next probably week or so. It'll probably be next Wednesday. And then when the season hits and you have questions for me and you want to take an hour of my time to do individual stuff with you, there's also a $100 tier, and that is what that is as well. So next, if you're in need of another bucket, don't mess with the greasy geese. Make sure you use Pearl lacrosse balls. That's Pearl, Pearl, as in the jewel. And Pearl lacrosse balls are just the best. Here, I'm actually going to grab it right now because it'll help. So these were the balls that we used at the 8v8 because Coach Watkins really likes them. These are actually just regular lacrosse balls, but you can see the texture there on Instagram. You can see the texture there, hopefully, on YouTube. And then you can see the texture there on TikTok. Now, these balls are cheaper than the X's because they're not made with that advanced polymer, but because they're textured, they don't grease up as quickly as the other ones. Eventually, they will grease up, but they're cheaper than the X's, which I think run about, I want to say they're about $2 a ball, which, if you count balls, which we did for this camp, we only lost like 6 balls for a 3-day camp, which I thought was an unbelievable thing. These are the way to go if you want kind of a cheaper version. But if you really want the good ones, which I recommend more than anything else, I would definitely go with these. Also, they can do custom ones, which many of you saw on Instagram and TikTok, and I think Facebook when I did the pinwheel. That was very cool. But so use code POWLAX when you order those balls, and you'll get 10% off your order. And yeah, I think that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and leave me some feedback. If there's any like buttons, hit the like button. And if you need anything from me, let me know. Have a good one. See you, everybody. I'm not even sure how to confirm TikTok. There you go.